All right, it gives me great pleasure, and I have to admit a certain amount of pride, to introduce the two speakers for tonight. The United States has sent over the years some extraordinary diplomats to represent the U.S. in Ankara. And we have two outstanding examples flanking me tonight. We did see in the film Ambassador Group, who later went on to Tokyo as his assignment, if you can imagine being there in 1939, 1940. But on my left is Ambassador Robert Pearson, who was our ambassador from 2000 to 2003. On my right is Ambassador Frank Ricciardone, who has just returned from a 3-year assignment going to Turkey in 2011. And I want to stress that both of these gentlemen are fluent in Turkish. I think that's quite an extraordinary achievement. On my left is a gentleman who is also fluent in French and Chinese. And Ambassador Ricciardone also speaks Italian, Arabic, as well as Turkish and one other. So we are blessed tonight to have two extremely intelligent and dedicated public servants who have ably represented the United States in Turkey. So I'm delighted to produce both of them for you. You have all read in the flyers that went out their background, so I'm not going to take away from their time speaking to you by telling you more about the background. I think you've already read it. We have two extraordinary individuals as speakers tonight. So first, may I turn to Ambassador Pearson, because he preceded Frank to Ankara. And sir, you have about 10 minutes. We will have 10 minutes for each speaker, and then we will follow that up with questions and answer period.
Liz, thank you very much for that warm introduction, which my father would have been proud of and my mother would have believed. I will say that it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. Ambassador Kilic, it's a particular honor that you are here, but to have this room filled for this evening's discussion, I certainly thank AFOT, I thank the Turkish Embassy, all of you, for the opportunity to share some ideas with you tonight. One sign of the greatness of a man or a woman in history is to take account of two realities that seem to be contradictory. The first is the relevance of that person's life for today, and the second is the degree of controversy in the discussion of the legacy. In that way, the life of such a person is constantly being brought forward to the present to determine what it means for the present. It is only through the lenses of the present that anything of fact or value has meaning. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk's life continues to resonate, and my brief attempt tonight is to think with you about what he means today. I am not Turkish, and so it is impossible to know the cultural and historical richness which a Turk would bring to this subject. I am not a scholar of Turkey, and therefore it is impossible for me to charm you tonight with a bouquet of anecdotes and observations that capture his essence. I bring the perspective of one American who had the privilege of serving in Turkey and learning a little bit about Turkey. The Ataturk that I know, therefore, has unique relevance in an American way. His relevance for me is not what he would do if he were here today among us. If he were here, of course, he would have to be a man different from the time and place to which he belongs. As a man of his time and place whose life still has importance today, therefore, let me offer a few thoughts. 4 observations are worth our attention, I think. First, Can you all hear me in the back? Everyone hear me? Okay. My mother always said she could hear me anywhere, so I hope that you can too. 4 observations are worth our attention, I think. First, he is proof that individuals make history. What happens to us is not just an inevitable forward moving of the stream of past history. Sudden things happen, and men and women are often the agents of those shifts. 2, he shows us that whatever the odds, there might be a victory, provided that intelligence, courage, and fortune combine to make it so. Third, he shows us that embracing a challenge in its entirety, with its many complex sub-issues, is the better formulation for a sustainable result. He reached out to call the inhabitants of the homeland of a collapsed empire Turks, and he invited them into a republic rather than try to resurrect the exhausted symbols of the past. Fourth, he shows us that continuous change enables a revolution to succeed. He was the author of the single greatest achievement in Turkish history since 1453. And yet, he did not try to simply lock in place his personal achievements as the sole guide for Turkey's tomorrows. Let me briefly expand on these 4 points. We can easily say that Ataturk, and with Ataturk, the moment found the man. That Ataturk appeared in history at the precise instant when he was most needed. But we could also say that Ataturk found the moment. His life already was a bridge between East and West. He grasped the existential reality that his country must radically change, and he had the vision and the will to take it there. In the shadows of a war that saw 4 great empires fall, German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman, he steered his country to a safe harbor. Germany and Austria fell to fascism, Russia to communism, and only Ataturk navigated his way forward to save the republic that he had founded. By giving the Turkish people the ownership of their country, he laid the foundation for democracy. He saw a need, and that gave rise to his ambition. He did not use his ambition to define the need. Secondly, he saw that victory is not merely a matter of mathematics. In most of the struggles of his life, military and political, the odds were against him. He fought to live another day, and he lived to fight another day. Outnumbered, he turned to the unbreakable will of the Turkish people and the common soldier. Facing a phalanx of world powers and his own government willing to give in to their demands, he went to the countryside to build the opposing force. Confronting centuries of tradition, ceremony, and culture, he cut the Gordian knot, binding the Turks to the past, and made them believe in the future. The fact that he fell short is no failure. In America, the promise of 1776, that all are created equal with unalienable rights, is still our challenge today, here in this country and around the world. Fortune was on his side, but nothing was inevitable when he undertook to turn an empire into a republic and a caliphate into a democracy. My first trip, for that very reason, from Ankara when I arrived in 2000, was to go to Samsun to acknowledge the importance of Ataturk's arrival there in 1919, and I also visited the battlefields of Dumlupınar and Afyon as the first American ambassador to do so. Third, his approach was comprehensive. In the development world, where I've been working for the last 6 years, there's a growing realization that solving social issues requires all the stakeholders to be involved. This collective impact approach takes more time and is more complicated than to try to solve the problem one issue at a time, but it tends to produce results that last. By incorporating education, government, rule of law, and social issues all together, he brought about one of the most profoundly positive upheavals of the 20th century. Yes, he used his will and his political acumen to force the changes ahead, but he went to the common people to personally teach his new ideas. When women were commonly regarded as less capable than men, he adopted a young girl who became Turkey's first female pilot. He showed the Turks that with unity, there were no limits on the country's potential. Fourth, he showed that continuous change is the only way to maintain and sustain a positive revolution. He knew as early as 1908 where he would like to see Turkey go. In 1918, he said that given the chance, he could do it in a single stroke. Well, as we know, it was not accomplished in a single stroke. It took 2 full decades of unrelenting effort to frame a state that would reach to the future. In the beginning, he combined diplomacy with military strength to win the War of Independence and establish an internationally recognized republic. Long before his death, he was laying the groundwork for a democratic society with the right of women to vote and the power of the legislature to begin the process that would lead to open elections and secret ballots. He declined offers to be president for life. He refused to put his party above the state. His legacy was the structure of a democracy, not a dictatorship. No one in this room would say that Ataturk was a god, that his thoughts are to be immutably applied down through time, whatever the circumstances. He was a human being, and like all of us, he made mistakes. He had setbacks. He made choices that seemed contradictory in the light of history. He fell short in his desire to transform his society completely. And perhaps that is not all bad. In pushing those who disagree into the farther reaches of political life, a society can harden their resolve to turn the tables if the opportunities arise. The weakest, the most vulnerable, need their protection. The ordinary citizen needs to be able to express himself and herself and realize that they have the protection of the law in doing so. In this way, the tensions of life and democracy are constantly addressed and released. Ataturk's legacy, therefore, is not that he was perfect, but that he saw, even as a young man, that a society open to the world and its best principles, resting on the will of the people with education, equality for all, and the rule of law, gives each new generation the promise of a better tomorrow. When I saw Ambassador Gru's comments with Ataturk, I was struck by what Ataturk said, which I'm going to repeat. This is in 1927, I believe. The Turkish nation is democratic by nature. There is no doubt that America is Turkey's friend in her aims. There might be more, Ataturk said. This could lead to a world of love with all old prejudices erased and all nations living in peace and prosperity. We can all hope that this will be Ataturk's final legacy and ours too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now may I call on Ambassador Ricciardone to speak to us.
Yes, you may, Liz. Thank you very much for having me here this evening, having Maria be here. We would never miss it. Thanks to all that you and Nina and everyone in the room does to sustain and advance and cherish Turkish-American relations throughout stressful times and peaceful times and all the times in between. Ambassador Kilic, I'm amazed you're able to come this evening with all on your plate and you're able to stay. Thank you very much. I take it not only as a mark of your commitment to your high mission to sustain this relationship in these times, but also a personal friendship. Thank you so much for coming. coming. I'm also very touched to see so many friends, I won't say old friends, but friends of my lifetime, my professional lifetime, so many years. I see Mort working there. I started in Turkey, and you were on the Turkey desk, I believe, all those years ago. Müküme Hoca is here, my first Turkish teacher from me. We have a great fondness for her. Other friends like Liz and others who go back only a couple of decades, but Mark and Mildred also go back to the earliest years of our career in the Foreign Service. So thank you all so much for coming. I thought with a group as sophisticated, Sevi Hanım here also with her husband Gürbüz, late husband Gürbüz, that when the first embassy I ever walked into as an American diplomat. Thank you so much for coming. Representing all the Turkish employees of our mission going back all those years, and so many others as well. I thought with a group like this that is so committed to the relationship and so concerned about the relationship and the noise in the relationship that is out there in the media, the best thing I could do, the most authoritative thing I could do, is offer a perspective of reassurance. And the reassurance goes back to what I never doubted through my 3.5 tours in Turkey, 10 years in Turkey over a 36-year career. And no less so latterly, when people are questioning whether, some people question whether Turkey and the United States really do share values or are committed allies or share the same purposes. I've never even in the turbulence of the past couple of years had any reason to doubt that. And here I will go to the phrase that Müküme Hanım taught us in our first month, once we learned some of the basics of Turkish. And in the older form, the words of Ataturk were Yurtta sulh, Cihanda sulh. Yurtta barış, dünyada barış for younger Turks. But we learned it in the old one. Peace at home, peace in the world. And I have heard every government of Turkey that I've, during my career since I've been there, whether it was President Ecevit or Prime Minister or President or Prime Minister Demirel in the earlier times, or Özal or now President Erdogan, formerly Prime Minister Erdogan, formerly President Gül. I've heard those words out of their lips in all the high occasions of state. It is still taught to Turkish school children. It is still the stuff of speeches. Turks believe it. Americans believe it too. And it was the everyday experience I had as ambassador there and as a more junior diplomat in previous assignments, that's what Turkey and the United States work for. Okay, if in those days, Ataturk knew very stressful days, and he upheld a world and a homeland of peace, but those were stressful times. These are times of stress in the homeland and stress in the world. I say that as American stress here, not only stress in Turkey. And it seems to me stress is the time when alliances and friendships and partnerships come under real test. It's the times when you have crises of a region where legitimacy of states, where societies are questioning their cohesion, that the true value of Turkish-American friendship and cooperation is to be found. I will just touch on a couple of practical ways. These are things that are process and kind of boring unless you're a diplomat and living it. But I think to a group like this that reads the headlines and worries about Turkish-American relations, I might just mention a few of these because they show that yes, while we have some real differences and there's a lot of noise in the system, at a practical, everyday level, the crises of the moment, and I mean specifically Syria, which might appear at times to be driving us apart, and do drive sometimes angry public commentary back and forth, they also are acting as they should and driving us to cooperate in ways that you would expect, that Turks and Americans would expect of their governments. So let me just look at the several different elements of statecraft